In the 197th Block Talks, we speak with Martin De Rijke, head of growth at Maple Finance, who talks about building for the next generation of DeFi users. I'm your host, Mauricio Magaldi, and this is Blockdrops, your weekly digest on blockchain for business. These news are not a form of endorsement, sponsorship, or encouragement for consumption, and are meant for educational purposes only. All right, everybody, I'm here with Martin De Rijke, who's going to tell us who he is and what he does with blockchain. Martin, welcome to Block Talks.
Thank you, Mauricio. Really exciting to be here. It's a great show, and thank you for the invitation.
It's a pleasure to have you on, man. Let's start from the beginning. What's your origin story?
Yes, so my origin story is in 2015. My grandmother told me about Bitcoin. So she was reading the newspaper. I was there on the couch, and she told me, "Hey, Martin, this Bitcoin thing, have you heard about it?" Because she knew I was interested in finance, right? So, and I didn't know about it yet. So I dove into it and very soon got absolutely fascinated with it. So that's how I started. And then in 2017, got fascinated by Ethereum and smart contract platforms, and obviously, experienced the whole crypto boom, as well as the bust, which we have seen a couple of those. But always, stayed around, kept researching the space and growing into the space. And then in 2022, early 22, I joined Maple. That's a bit over 3 years ago now.
Cool. And in terms of the things that really triggered your interest, you were into finance and all, but did you have a previous career that kind of made sense with Bitcoin, Ethereum? What's the things that in your previous history made it interesting for you to take on crypto more intensively?
Yeah, I was really figuring out that compound interest is like the eighth world wonder, right? And understanding that, I plugged it into a calculator in Google, and if you compound at 10% for 30 years, and you just invest every month, you end up a millionaire, right? And that just felt so out of reach. But just that simple mechanism, compound interest, just always really fascinated me. So then I decided to start investing very early, right? Because it's the easiest way, the easier route to having a financially independent life and having financial freedom and just being able to do what you're truly passionate about, right? And then so it started before Bitcoin, just in stocks, and I was always fascinated with like Tesla innovation and things like that. So that's why I started investing. And then when my grandmother told me about Bitcoin, the thing that fascinated me about Bitcoin was just the fact that it was like an internet currency, and that to me felt like very strange. It's like, okay, it's a currency native to the internet. Like, how does that work, right? And then you start understanding that, hey, we don't need a bank. You have a wallet, and you can just send it to people. And back then, Bitcoin was still more seen as a currency, right? It wasn't seen as much as a store of value, which right now is obviously really the narrative. So I also thought about it more from that perspective. And then just seeing how small it was in market cap back then, it was like $200 per coin. It was just super small, and it was just at some point I realized, okay, this thing is either going to go to 1 million or to zero, right? It's very binary. Like it's not just going to go to 100K and sit there forever, right? Or to sit at $200 forever. Like that just wouldn't make sense. It's either going to continue to be adopted or it's going to die out, right? And yeah, I just saw that the adoption was the more likely path, and it was also asymmetric upside, right? You can buy something for $200, but the potential for it to go to 1 million, I mean, that's a good trade. So
Interesting. And what's the story with Maple? How did you get to the point where you joined the team? What was the the path to be visible into an industry that is pretty much nascent? What's the trick there? If people are interested in joining DeFi from a TradFi background, how does that work? Tell us a little bit about that story.
yeah, that's an excellent question. And I would say the key thing I would advise everybody is just go and do stuff, right? So what I did is I had no background in finance. Just I was passionate about it, but I studied something completely different. I didn't work in finance. I worked in medical devices, in a completely different sector, and not even in a financial role or anything like that. So, but I was just really passionate about it and did it late nights, weekends, early mornings, whenever I had time. And so what I started doing is just actually using DeFi and then posting about it on Twitter, right? So I have my own Twitter account, and then I started posting about Maple, and that's how I got in touch with the Maple team, right? And then at some point there was a job available, and I just applied to it, and I knew the team already, and of course they were going to give me a job interview, right? Because they knew me and they wanted to give me the opportunity. And then during the job interview, there was just a great click, and it all worked out. So without any crypto finance experience, so that's definitely for everybody here that's curious and is like, where do I start? I don't have experience, or you know, I don't have the skill set. Just go do stuff, and learn, right? That's the beauty of crypto. You can literally go to an app, start using it, start talking about it on Twitter, start building relationships. Everybody is super collaborative and open in crypto. Like, that's beautiful. Most people just answer their DMs, and just go from there, take it step by step, and at some point, you'll probably be able to land a job at a DeFi company.
And what do you think is the bigger differentiator across these two industries? I mean, decentralization is obviously one, but what do you feel are some of the differences between the regular traditional world and the DeFi world for someone from some of our listeners that are not too big on DeFi? What can you point out, like the top 3 or 5 things that make DeFi so interesting to work on? As not as someone who just uses it, but also someone who builds for it.
The exciting thing about building DeFi is that you can truly build a system that creates that financial opportunity for everybody, right? So I'm very privileged to have grown up in the Netherlands. There's good banks, there's financial applications, there's access to all the stocks you want. It's great infrastructure, right? But most of the people in the world don't have that. They live in a country with hyperinflation, um, or they are not necessarily financially savvy, or they don't have the time, or there's a lot of different reasons, right? So what I truly believe in is in empowering everybody to use finance and use it to improve their lives and take control of their lives, right? Like financial problems are some of the worst problems to deal with, because it can really give you a lot of stress. Ultimately, you want to create a good future for your family, children, yourself, your friends. And I think finance is a very key component of that. And DeFi it's just the infrastructure to do that on a global scale. So anybody, anywhere in the world can use these platforms. And right now there's a lot of UX issues, right? It's sometimes hard to use and things like that. But all these problems will get solved. And that's the exciting thing of working on it, because you can actually solve those problems, right? And build something that people love and people use. So that's what I'm personally most passionate about, is just hearing about users that use Maple that actually make 10% per year, and they use it to keep their wealth safe and to compound it over time, right?
So let's talk adoption. You talked about users. I'm a product person by trade, and I would love to hear a little bit more about what's the user base like. What are the actual problems other than returns you're solving for these people, and how do you get to incorporate feedback from the user base? And yeah, let's start with that, and I'll probe you a little bit more in terms of overall adoption.
For sure. Yeah, so our product suite is very simple. We have stablecoin yield and Bitcoin yield. And stablecoin yield is generated with over collateralized lending. So we issue loans to institutions, all over collateralized with crypto collateral. And then the Bitcoin side is like a Bitcoin staking product. Um, Now, the user base on the stablecoin side is predominantly individuals, and then a lot of high net worth individuals as well. Right, most crypto users are pretty savvy, and there's a lot of high net worth individuals in the crypto space. It's distributed all over the world, so Asia, Europe, North America. We're also integrated into Binance, OKX, so we have those, they are providing us capital from those users as well, right? They're depositing into Maple. So that's where the more like real retail audience is, right? People with like $25, $50, $100 deposits. That's probably more emerging markets. And then we have the whole institutional arm. So those are your asset managers, your family offices, corporates, mainly crypto native companies that want to earn a yield on their stablecoins. Yeah, we have seen hyper growth. So at the beginning of the year, we're like 400 million TVL. Now we're at 2 billion in TVL, and we're rapidly growing.
We're looking into a world that's moving from being rather anti crypto in whatever shape or form that was into something that is more accepting of crypto. We're seeing specific jurisdictions have specific legislation being passed and regulations being passed, implemented, even new regulators popping up just to manage digital assets. Um, this tends to indicate a little bit more of a legitimacy of the industry as time goes on. And for those of us who've been longer in this particular journey, is interesting, curious, and sometimes promising. But there's also risks that we're not seeing, especially when it comes to DeFi, because central banks are central regulators. DeFi is a decentralized type of application. So in the work that you're doing now, how do you see this particular area of the world of regulation shaping up, and what has been, if any, conversations or education sessions or interactions with regulators you have engaged in that kind of gives us a better hope for DeFi in the medium and long term?
Our CEO, Sydney Powell, he was invited to an SEC roundtable, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. And that was about tokenization and the impact on financial markets, capital markets. So that was sort of, I think, probably our first, public engagement, with regulators, and that's really exciting, right? Like they are engaging with DeFi platforms like Maple. So we are always open to collaborate and give our perspective, and we obviously have a very real life perspective in terms of what is actually happening in DeFi, right? Like not what is not just what the potential is, but also how are people using it today. So I think that, especially now in the US, which is the main jurisdiction that truly matters, right, in financial markets, the most important jurisdiction, there's now a lot of pro digital assets, pro DeFi um, rhetoric across regulators, politicians, and let's actually see all of that come to fruition, right? We don't know exactly what all of that's going to look like, but it's at least extremely positive to see that. And then the main thing that we are really excited on as Maple is the stablecoin bill. So, I think stablecoins are the lifeblood of crypto, right? Almost every application is powered by stablecoins. Like it's the unit of account of everything. Like Bitcoin is still priced in dollars, right? So stablecoins are extremely important for the adoption of DeFi. All the lending protocols, the trading protocols, the perps taxes, like pretty much everything is denominated in stablecoins. So we're really excited. And then once you have stablecoins, people are going to earn yield on it, right? You don't want to have an idle stablecoin sitting in your wallet for too long. You want to put it to productive use, right? You want to earn a yield on it. So we see that as a very natural growth trend for us, where the amount of stablecoins that gets into circulation, at some point, those are all gonna, not all, but a lot of them are gonna end up in yield products. And Maple is obviously one of the top choices. So I think a lot of people still expect like, oh, DeFi is this little experimental zone, this place of innovation. And at some point, the big boys are going to come in and just launch their own like DeFi protocols or their own chains or whatever else. I think at Maple and myself really take the view that things are actually going to come to us. And the DeFi protocols you see right now, the chains here you see right now, are probably going to be the ones that are going to be benefiting the most from all of this adoption. And that's a pretty contrarian bet, I would say. Which is, and you see it already. I mean, you see Cantor, we closed a partnership with Cantor last week, late May. And that's a proper TradFi firm partnering with a DeFi platform. That's with actual value, right? Like not just an innovative project, but actually putting capital to work with a $2 billion facility. So, that's a potential to draw down and grow into. So yeah, I think that those are just a couple of data points of what we're seeing, and we're really excited to, grow the current state of DeFi, and actually bring the real value of it to the market, right? Because if we just go to private chains, I mean, it's TradFi all over again with just a modernized database.
I could not agree more. In terms of adoption, you gave us a couple of examples, but what are the biggest challenges and hurdles, and how are you addressing them in the current scenario?
Yeah, so it's still an education curve, right? Just having people know about it, right? Like people have very limited attention, very limited time, and it's extremely hard to get somebody to care about something. So Bitcoin, people are starting to care about it, right? You have BlackRock is pushing it, Fidelity is pushing it, the banks, JP Morgan is now accepting it. It's like people are slowly but surely really starting to care about Bitcoin at scale. Of course, we've always had the maxis, but that's a minority. But starting to see that it goes the same, right? You have the innovators that start first, then you have the early adopters, the early majority, and that's the way you grow into it. So I think right now you're sort of like between the early adopters and the early majority, right? In terms of Bitcoin, about 5% of the population owns it, and probably 5 years from now that's going to be 30%, right? And so we're going to scale into that, but that's Bitcoin, right? DeFi is still much further behind in terms of adoption. So for us to get there, right now it's mainly still innovators, right? People that are truly innovative. And most mainstream people aren't using DeFi yet, right? I mean, pretty much nobody, right? Mainstream. So I think that's going to be a next evolution. And that is going to come, right? And you're starting to see the first signs of it right now. But yeah, that's before, we really see mainstream adoption of DeFi. That's probably still going to take another 5 years.
Is this just a matter of education or user experience, or even the whole regulation we were talking about just now? Because if you think about it, there are a couple of takes, and I want to kind of test your opinion on it. One is that say the boomer generation won't ever touch it. It's too late for them, too complicated. They're not willing to go all in, and to a certain extent, they don't even care anymore. So that's one take. The other take is maybe we should not build for them then. Just build for the, Gen Zs and Gen Alphas, and that will sort itself out. And it's going to be a generational um, transition rather than accelerated adoption. I'm more on the other end of that conversation. I think everyone can benefit from DeFi if we build for them, if we are meeting the users where they are. So how do you approach this potential dichotomy, because there's only so much resources you can use to build in a particular direction? How, just help me understand what's the frame of mind when you think about these things.
If you think about the smartphone, right? The smartphone launched in 2007, and it took my grandparents until 2023 to have a smartphone, right? So that's like 16 years. And they are probably one of the last ones to adopt it. I mean, now pretty much everybody has a smartphone, right? It's very rare to find somebody without a smartphone, unless they actually choose to not have it because they don't want to get distracted, But in terms of actually, most people have a smartphone. So that's going to be a similar curve as with DeFi. I think these adoption curves are very predictable often. They're very consistent. There's no technology that gets adopted by the whole world in a year, right? Like that almost never happens. Like even ChatGPT and all these AI models, they are extremely powerful, but still most of the world is not using them, right? They probably have a couple 100 million users. um, that use it regularly. So, and that's like the most powerful technology we've ever invented. Um, and that's already around now for 2.5 years. So I think sure, the adoption cycles will go faster and faster as the human race progresses, just because everything goes faster. But we cannot expect that DeFi is going to be adopted by everybody in 5 years. So, in terms of who do you build them for? So, you build first, to your point, for the Gen Zers and the millennials, but there will come a time when you will build for the boomers, right? Like once you have most of the Gen Zers and the millennials in DeFi, like then it's the right time to build for boomers. And I'm just talking about general boomers. Like we have a couple of people from the boomer generation that are obviously landing on Maple, but they are just very innovative, right? Like they've built companies, they're early to Bitcoin. So it's more about the personality type of someone versus, your age. But to your point, you generally speaking see that younger people adopting quicker. So that's what we built for. And that's why our growth strategy overall is like first get all of crypto native users on Maple. Right? We're doing a great job with that. We're rapidly scaling. We're partnering with all the biggest players in the crypto space. Then the phase after that is partner with the Robinhoods, the Squares, sort of like the fintech applications that are being used by the millennials and the Gen Zers, and we want to meet them where they're at, right? Like we don't expect them to come to Maple. We will come to you and bring our yield to you, right? And then once we're integrated into those type of fintech applications, to your point, you have the Gen Zers, you have the millennials, and then the next step is to get to the boomers. So we need to get integrated into, you know, Charles Schwab or your brokerage accounts or potentially, private banks, and we need to get integrated in those places. So that's sort of the natural curve of how we plan to scale Maple up to be $1 trillion asset manager. But step by step, right? Like the first goal is to get to 4 billion and really conquer the crypto space. But we have long-term plans, obviously, to keep scaling this up and become a asset manager behemoth.
I love that vision. Yeah. For that to happen and for us to not work another 15, 20 years in this industry and then realize we didn't fix it enough and we kind of landed on the same place. What's the one thing we should fix and why?
That's a great question. I think like proof of reserves and transparency in that side, like is the sort of the link that is still missing. Um, because DeFi right now is 100% transparency, right? That's like the standard. But I don't think that's a realistic standard forever. You can never show every single detail at all times, right? There needs to be some level of privacy. However, it cannot be such privacy that you can hide stuff, right? That is wrong. So it needs, and that's why I think the 0K and all its proofs comes in, where you can verify things without knowing the exact information. And that is, I would say, a big element that still needs to be solved for DeFi to truly work in like a TradFi environment. Right? Because TradFi firms are extremely private, right? Like they don't want to share their trades, their positions, their whatever with counterparties. But at the same time, we cannot, to your point, we cannot just have TradFi all over again, but just on chain. So we need to have those independent, proof of reserves, proof of assets, um, proof of strategy, right? That the strategy that they're saying is actually happening. Like I would say that's still a big infrastructure build that needs to happen and really needs to be implemented as well. And we're doing that as Maple. So we're actually that's like one of the big next projects that we're doing, and we're solving that. At least for our product.
Interesting. Interesting. To a certain extent, um, we're seeing a couple things in the blockchain space that might have DeFi implications since DeFi is so close to the infrastructure. One of them is the MEV, the maximum extractable value, which is for some it's considered a bug, for some it's considered a feature, and I want to hear what's your vision on that. Um, but also the ability to move assets around, and as the restaking feature evolves, have different assets secure different protocols. This could also be considered somewhat DeFi. Both of them have inherent risks that may or may not play in favor or against the promise of DeFi. And you were talking about transparency; it kind of hit me. Those two things are very important. And I personally, even though I do weekly research, I haven't seen any material efforts, both in the blockchain and in the DeFi space, of trying to either amplify that as a feature or resolve this as a bug. What are your what's your interpretation of the MEV as that either side, and what do you feel that restaking could present in terms of risks that we haven't yet properly managed?
Yeah, so in terms of MEV, by nature, I'm sort of like a free market capitalist. I believe in like market efficiency and giving everybody the opportunity to profit from inefficiencies. At the same time, I think that we it should be something that one side of the market is trying to solve, right, and minimize MEV. While at the same time, there should be another side of the market that's trying to maximize it and like extract as much value from it, right? I think those two forces together actually give the best result. Um, and then it's going to land at some equilibrium that I think is going to be healthy. Um, so that's my thought on that. My thought on risk-taking. So it's a very interesting concept and idea. I think there's pretty much zero product market fit right now for it, in terms of actually, it driving real value. Although I do believe that there's some. I mean, it's not zero. Like there's some initial concepts that are being tested out. Um, but I do think at some point it's going to be valuable, right? And if you want to start some exchange or chain or just product, right, and you need validators, you want to start relatively decentralized, you can just rent your security, right? And you can have a big pool of assets that is being, restaked to your product, and you can basically benefit from that security. It's like it's like the Middle Ages where kings could either hire mercenaries or they could recruit their own army, right? It's pretty easy to start with just an army of mercenaries, and then at some point build your empire and actually recruit your own soldiers. So I do think it's a sensible business strategy, at scale, but I don't think it has been proven yet. But it's similar to everything in crypto, right? We had DeFi summer, extremely unsustainable. But then look at us now, 5 years later. There's a beautiful DeFi ecosystem, and there's a lot of very sustainable protocols around. So I think risk taking will be similar. Where 5 years from now, we're going to be looking at a couple of protocols that have serious product market fit and traction. Just the first iteration of it hasn't resulted yet in any scalable business models.
This is a 24/7 industry. There's a lot of FOMO, a lot of things happening when you're supposed to be asleep. Um, do you have any particular habits or routine that you use to keep yourself healthy as you work in DeFi?
that's that's the best question of today. um, yeah, so I think it's all about your habits, right? That's extremely important. Is to recognize that you can very easily get caught up in the moment and just be completely consumed by everything that's happening. Work extremely hard and burn yourself out, right? That's a very serious risk. Um, so I think there's a couple of components that are very important. So number one is having like a stable family, and children. So like obviously not everybody's might have that, or but it's definitely something to aspire to. And that gives you a very stable foundation, right? So, you know, like I'm not fully reliant on DeFi for my mental sanity. Like if I spend time with my wife and kids, like I just forget about DeFi, right? And you actually realize what's truly important. So that's I think very helpful to stay like mentally stable. Then the other thing is just sleep well. Like all the standard like biohacks, right? Sleep well, exercise, wake up early, don't drink too much sugar. Eat healthy. Those things are truly move the needle. They compound over time. So try to live very healthy. And then the other thing is, filter out the noise, right? There's only a couple things that truly matter. And the rule that I live by is consume less and create more. So don't be scrolling on Twitter for 5 hours and consume everything that's happening, but do that for a limited amount of time, right? You need to be up to date on what's happening in the industry. Set up your content inputs as well. Like, I have, for example, a couple of Telegram channels that I'm in that just give me the most important news and just headlines, right? So you stay up to date without seeing too much noise. Um, and then, but create, right? You want to be creating all the time. And creating doesn't just mean that you're working, on your job, but it's also, exercising, spending time with your family, writing down your thoughts, doing journaling. Um, and yeah, you just want to be creating a lot. Like that gives a big sense of fulfillment instead of just being, consuming and being consumed by other things and sort of other people's lives.
Yeah, we don't want to be consumed and crushed by the very things we're trying to build. You're on point there. How do people get to know more about what you're building yourself? Whether you go to conferences or not, how they can keep tabs on the things that you do and learn more from you.
Yes. Yeah. So you can follow us on Twitter, Maple Finance. And then my personal account is just my full name, Martin De Rijke. And then that's really the best place to go. It's really Twitter. And then we have a website too, maple.finance. And you can land on, our products are featured there, and then you can find everything out. And then yeah, we pretty much always have a presence at the big conferences. So if you would like to meet us, we will at least one of our team members will be there.
Thank you so much for taking the time, and I love learning more about you and your story. And yeah, let's keep rolling, and maybe we'll meet each other in a crypto conference somewhere.
Yeah, thanks, Mauricio. It was amazing to be here.
Thank you. Catch us online. We're on Instagram at BlockDropsPodcast, on Twitter at BlockDropsPod or 0x Mauricio. We're on Lens at blockdrops.lens. We have a newsletter on LinkedIn. Write to us at blockdropspodcast@gmail.com, and you can listen to the BlockDrops podcast at Spotify, iColab, Faberbund Tech, and all of the other major streaming platforms. Yay! Shout out to Martin for sharing about his journey and perspectives with us, and also to Rachel Salpol for making this conversation possible. Don't forget to leave the ratings on your favorite player and check out the merch store at blockdropspodcast.xyz. This is all for today. Stay rare, stay weird. LFJ.